What is up, everybody? Tyler here with TCG University for the card game UniVersus, and today I'm going to be showing you Jeff's Void Siegfried deck. This is a deck that got played for this week's Campus Championship, which was the best of this set, where we all got to pick one character from every set in the game of UniVersus. A weird way of saying it, and nobody else could play a character from that set. So Siegfried got picked. Void was the only symbol I think that we haven't done a deck profile of yet on the channel. We might not have a good one yet up either, but that'll be next Campus Championship. Um. Anyways, if you want to see this deck in action, go check out that playlist. It'll be up on the channel. I'm excited about Siegfried. He's one of my favorite characters of the game. I'm excited to show you guys what he can do. So let's hop right into it. All right, so Siegfried, what does he do? First ability is after he blocks with a foundation, he gets to build that foundation down. This right here is my favorite part of Siegfried. I love whenever you get advantage from blocking. I think it's the best part of this game. I love cards that say after you block, do stuff. And Siegfried says after you block, build a foundation. Nutty, insane. I love this ability on Siegfried. It makes him one of my favorite characters, hands down. The biggest problem I think with it is that it leads to like hyper defense, which is something that I don't like playing in this game. Which isn't helpful with his second ability not being amazing, which is check a 4. This attack gets, well, I don't know. I like his second ability. Check a 4. This attack gets plus 3 damage or minus 2 damage, and it can't receive any damage bonus or penalty. After that, your opponent can flip a foundation face down to cancel this effect. So the reason why Siegfried sort of becomes hyper defensive is your opponent doesn't flip any foundations. They just sort of say, okay, well, I guess all my attacks just have minus 2 damage. I'll just deal with it. And then Siegfried says, I'm going to block everything with these foundations. And it sort of leads to a longer game where you don't get to flip all your opponent's foundations face down. So you don't get to guarantee that you get plus damage to kill them. But you also don't get a guarantee that you get minus damage so that they can't kill you. But you're also blocking everything. So they have to like really hold cards to get a perfect string of attacks. And it gets messy. It leads to like weird play, which is why I don't think Siegfried gets a whole ton of play, especially under the void symbol, which is what we're going to be showing you today. But I think I like him a whole lot. I'm done bloviating about him. I think that if he doesn't have a place in the game right now, he will in the future. I say look out for him because I love this character so much. But anyways, enough simping over Siegfried. Let's jump into the attacks of the deck. The first attack that we're going to be talking about is Mexican Typhoon. This card is nutty with your opponent having face down foundations. So a lot of the time, your opponent will flip cards face down so that they can actually like deal damage and try to kill you. And this just says like, yeah, do that. Every face down foundation that you have, I get plus 1 damage on an 8 damage throw. This also says your opponent flips 2 foundations or they discard a card or discard 2 cards. That is nutty. It is super, super cool. Which is why this is a 1 check on a 6 diff. But you know, that's what you get for cards with like mega stats, you know? It's what you got to deal with. It's what you got to look out for. There's some risk in playing the attacks in these decks because they have bad checks on them, but they make up for it with their power. And this is like one of the most powerful cards in the deck. The next card we're going to be talking about is the Rook Splitter. I think this is Siegfried's best attack, hands down. Stun 2, your opponent flips 2 foundations or they discard a card. This is everything that Siegfried wants to do. 9 times out of 10, your opponent's going to flip 2 foundations, which means that if you flip enough of their foundations, they can no longer stop you from getting plus 3 damage on every single attack, or making sure that every single one of their attacks get minus 2 damage, which is crazy, which is nutty. Or they do what Void wants to do and they discard cards from their hand, and then it doesn't matter if all your attacks don't get 3 damage. They're all coming at them for base damage, which Those two things compounded, where your opponent has no hand and everything gets +3 damage, means that you guarantee just like kill them, easy peasy, no problem at all. Also, this is powerful too. Not a whole lot of things in this deck deal with momentum, so giving a card with stun 2, powerful 2, and an extra 3 damage on top of that, crazy. 90. And I just lied to you. We're playing Casa de Leviathan. This is what you're going to use momentum on. I forgot about this card. I didn't really look up the attacks before I started this deck profile. Oops. This card just is discard all my momentum to either destroy all my opponent's foundations or discard cards out of my opponent's hand or burn them for a whole bunch. And then a 7 high for 8 is crazy. It's nutty. And if they get to desperation because you've been hitting them with these beefy attacks, you get 2 free momentum. Awesome. Crazy. Great card. Next, we're going to be talking about Tomahawk Buster out of 3 of. This card is a 4 low for 3. Actually, it's a 4 high for 6. Actually, it's a 4 high for 9 with EX2. That's basically why this card is in the deck. Your opponent can discard a card to cancel you, giving it the high, making it a high attack. Giving it the high attack is a weird way of saying it. Making this card a high attack and give it +3 damage, but that's great because they can't block whatever big beefy attack you're swinging at them next. Which, you know, a lot of the time they'll just let you get a bunch of damage on this thing, which is really all right. Last card in the deck we're going to be talking about is Downward Spiral. This card's insane in a Void deck. It's a free discard, and it's like 1,000,000 damage. A lot of the time, your opponent's going to only have like 3 cards in their hand going into your turn. So discarding one of them for free, making sure that this at minimum gets like +3 to 6 damage, or +3 to let's roll it back. +2 to 6 damage. There we go. Is amazing. Plus whatever you've decided to play before it. If you've discarded your whole hand, this card is hitting them for 1,000,000. But that's all the attacks in the deck. Next, we're going to be moving on to the actions and the assets. First one we're going to be talking about is Your Path Ends Here. I think this is an amazing card for Siegfried. Blocking and making sure that your opponent flips 2, or giving this attack 1,000,000 damage or -1,000,000 damage, or your opponent flips foundations is great. It works exactly how Siegfried wants it to. Probably why it's his action, you know? And on a 1 high block is great. You don't get to build it down after blocking, but that doesn't super matter. Next is Requiem, giving something even +3 or 4 damage because your opponent has 3 or 4 face downs is, I think, really, really good. Void's biggest problem is damage. Void doesn't usually have cards that give a bunch of damage because it's kind of unfair to ditch your opponent's entire hand and then give a bunch of damage to all the attacks. So they purposefully do it. So this card's very needed. It's also like a big damage reduction, which is great. Next is Archean in Nirvana. Readying a foundation once per turn and canceling keyword abilities is great. This card is like a staple card. It should definitely be a 1 of in any of these 3 symbols. Like it's amazing. It's great whenever it's out for everything. And then the last one is Maus Aeneas. A lot of these attacks, being able to copy them is great. If you only have a Downward Spiral in your deck, you're killing your opponent. If you only have this in your discard pile, you're killing your opponent. Casa de Leviathan is great when your opponent's at desperation, but not much after that. But this card just says like I get a basically get 2 attacks for free. Great card for that. And you get to stack what's in your deck. You get to stack attacks back into your deck to make sure that your opponent picks what you want them to pick. But that is all the actions and the assets. We'll now move on to the foundations. And this foundation, usually when we do foundations here, we like to split them into groups. Almost all these foundations are defensive, so we'll definitely talk about that first. The main goal of it is I'm going to be able to block with all my foundations and then build them down. So the first one we're going to talk about is Face of a Monster. This card says a free -2 or pseudo free -2 speed. You got to pay 1 vitality to get an extra -1. But like this is free speed hate. That also says that if they're at desperation, they have to start, or if they're at deadlock, they have to start discarding cards. Or if you're at desperation, you get to pick and choose what this attack's zone is, which means you always get a full block something, which is great in Siegfried because you're just building one for free at that point. By your opponent playing an attack, crazy, nutty good. Right, it's a 4 of, and then we're playing 4 Feifei. This just says flip -3 speed. Again, blocking all your opponent's attacks means that you have to have a lot of speed hate in the game. And this is like one of the best speed hate cards in the game. It's a 1/5. It's a low block. It gives -3 speed for a flip, which flip is like absolutely nothing of a cost. Great, amazing foundation. Great for Siegfried especially. We're then playing 4 Conquest of Terror. Conquest of Terror. It's more speed hate. I should have just made a whole group of just speed hate cards because there's a lot of them in the deck. But it's a 1/5, which means it's amazing to build. It has a 2 low block, which is a great block, and it is a bunch of speed. He either flip for -2 speed, which we just talked about is great because flip is not a cost, or commit for -4 speed if your opponent is at desperation, which means if you just smack them up a bunch, that means you get to defend. You get to defend hella good. Great, awesome staple card in all 3 symbols. Next, Telekinetic Mastery. This just says that if your opponent starts giving bonuses, which they usually aren't able to because you're going to check a 4, give it -2 damage, and they're not going to want to flip foundations to make sure that they can get damage. But this says that if they do stuff, like if the first thing they do is, I'm going to give this thing damage, you got to immediately respond and give it -2 damage and then another -2 damage. Or if they're giving a bunch of speed to make sure that you can't block, this says, no, I get to stop you from doing that. Great for sort of mitigating what your opponent wants to do. Then we're playing 4 Wearlight. This card is very necessary in a Void deck. Void, it's a lot of like a little stuff to mitigate defense, but it's all like speed reduction, which means you gotta block real good to do stuff. This just says I'm not going to deal with whatever you're throwing at me. I'm going to check a 4, give it -4 damage or -2 damage. You can't give any damage bonus, and then I'm going to flip, say you can't do anything else. You're swinging this attack at me right now, and I'm going to block it and build a foundation. Great card. Next, this is like my favorite card to play in Siegfried. Usually under an Earth version, but it works in Void too. Pride of the Tribe. This says that if you commit it to pass the check of a block, your opponent flips 1 foundation. Amazing in Siegfried. Amazing. All you're wanting to do is block. So checking whatever, blocking, committing this and flipping a foundation because you committed to block this attack to then build down a foundation. Perfect. Wonderful. Outstanding. It's also a 1 mid block. Crazy good. It is a 4 check, which is a little unfortunate, but what are you going to do? Next, Desperate for Redemption. This card is like only really able to be played in Siegfried because the whole goal of it is to block with it, move it down, pick up a second copy of it, add to your hand, and now you can essentially block every single attack your opponent's throwing at you by just blocking with this card and picking it back up and blocking with it. But sometimes you're like, well, I'll just build it out on my turn. When it moves down, I'll pick up this face down or this committed foundation, and then I'll block with it and build it down. And now it's basically ready again. It's great for like Feifei, you know? Flip for -3 speed. I'm going to block with it, build it down, pick up that Feifei, block with it, build it down, another flip for -3 speed. It's a very awesome utility piece for Siegfried. Next, Match Made in Hell. This card just says that you get to destroy problem foundations. Your opponent doesn't get to debuild from it, but like flip. I don't like that thing right there. Get rid of it is great for the deck, and it's a 2 high block. Awesome, crazy. Deadlock doesn't usually. Oh, Deadlock actually might come into play because you're playing Siegfried. But Deadlock First Form, you destroy one of your opponent's foundations, or Deadlock First Form, commit, selectively destroy one of your opponent's foundations. Crazy. It says that like your opponent doesn't get to start building a bunch of foundations to make sure that you can't flip all of them, because you're just going to start destroying those face-up foundations if they decide to go into deadlock, or it just keeps them out of deadlock, and it's just easier to flip all their foundation. It gives them very little utility to fight against you. Next, Esoteric Yoga. Commit this to say that if your opponent tries to draw something, no, they actually don't get to draw something, and then destroy it for -4 speed. Blocking is like super essential in Siegfried. That's that. It's a 2 high block and it's a 6 check. Crazy. This is one of those cards where you don't have to worry about the difficulty because you can just block with it and play it maybe easier than you could have if you held it in your hand. That's just such the coolest thing about Siegfried, I think, is that like sometimes you can play these high difficulty cards, and then if they have good blocks on them, which they usually do because they're high difficulty, you get to just build them in. You get a bunch of value out of playing the game. I really like it. I just like it a whole lot. Next, Worldseres. This is another card that just gets rid of problem foundations. If your opponent is playing something that you don't want to deal with, you just add it back to their hand. Or if you want to make sure that your opponent can't deal with, your opponent can't flip something to cancel you or deal with Mexican Typhoon, you'll add that face-up card to their hand just to get it out of the staging area, just to make sure that they can't stop you from giving a bunch of damage. And it stops stun. And then the last sort of defensive piece in the deck is we are many, you are but one. This just says check a 6, your opponent discards a momentum. That's basically why it's in the deck, because you're not checking character cards, and you're not doing stuff with resource symbols. So discarding your opponent's momentum so that they don't get to do a bunch of crazy stuff with it is great. And again, you don't necessarily have to worry about the 3 diff because it has a 2 mid block. So it's great for blocking anything. And it's a 6 check. Awesome. Crazy. Good. Next is sort of the not defensive, but helps you out with the deck cards. Voice of Reason. If you need an attack that you don't have in your hand, well, discard this foundation that you don't need or don't want. Draw a card. Perfect for that. Make sure that if you have a block in your hand that isn't going to work with whatever your opponent's throwing out, discard it, try to draw into something a little bit better. Great spam foundation for that. 2, recovering lost treasures. This just says it's basically for like Mace and Ace. I'm going to flip add this attack into my deck, give my next check +2, commit with Mace and Ace, say that you pick whatever attack that I've decided to keep in my discard pile, get a bunch of value. And it's good spam foundation. And then lastly, Uniting Rebels, a little bit of gain vitality. You block everything, you reduce a bunch of damage, so when you hit desperation, being able to slowly gain it back is great. It's a great way to mitigate the end of the game, give you a little bit more of like, I'm just surviving, I'm just a survivor. And it's awesome. 0-6, awesome for building, awesome. And there you have it, folks. That is Jeff's Void Siegfried deck that he played for this week's Best of the Set Campus Championship. If you want to go see this deck in action, go check out that. There will be a playlist for it on the channel. And if you like this video, please leave a like. It's the single best way that you can support the channel. It shows YouTube that this is content worth watching. It pops it up on the algorithm for other people to click on and see. And it's a very nice thing to do. It's super easy. It's just one click. If not, that's fine too. I'm not forcing your hand. I can't. But anyways, thank you all for watching and have a wonderful night.